Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video episode on Forgotten Weapons. I'm here at the Rock Island Auction Company taking a look at the guns of their September 2014 premiere auction. And I figured I'd take this would be a good opportunity to show you a pair of guns of the same type that are slightly different. These are both harmonica pistols. These are both marked by Jarre, I think I may have mangled that, but of Paris, who was a noted manufacturer of harmonica guns. So the harmonica gun was a very interesting, very short-lived style of firearm that existed basically only until the centerfire cartridge was finally perfected. These particular ones use Pinfire ammo, which was developed in the 1830s, and the idea was you had, think of it as like a normal metallic cartridge, except that the primer is actually inside the brass case, fully enclosed inside the powder, and there's a very short firing pin actually embedded in the case coming out through the top wall of the case. So to fire the gun, what you do is have a regular percussion type hammer hit that extended pin. That pin then hits the primer inside the case and fires the round. This worked fairly well. It was certainly better than paper cartridges, and it had some definite advantages over rimfire cartridges. The downsides were that these cartridges were relatively easily damaged. If you disturb the pin too much, the cartridge might not work. It was also possible during handling, if they were dropped or roughly handled, you might accidentally hit the pin and detonate a cartridge, which is obviously a bad thing. Some of the early designs weren't all that gas tight. You might get gas leakage around that pin, although that was fixed with some later development. And lastly, they were a little bit awkward to use in firearms because you had to allow for this protruding pin to come out of the case. As a result, they were most popular in revolvers, where you could allow for space for the pin in the cylinder, and harmonica guns, where it was also not that difficult to accommodate the pin. These cartridges were popular through the 1800s. They pretty much ran out of steam by the 1890s. Much better things had been developed, and they were just tapering off by that time. The harmonica guns these were patented by the Frenchman, Jarre, in Paris in late 1850s, early 1860s. He had several different patents. And the idea was you would have, well, it varied a bit. In this case, you would have one barrel and a whole series of chambers. And so you could load 10 cartridges, and every time you fired, you'd have a double action trigger. The hammer would fire the current cartridge, and then it would advance this whole harmonica action bar to the next cartridge. So you had a 10-shot repeater. That's the plus side. The downside, of course, is that you have this wide, rather clumsy bar sticking through the gun. So, a little difficult to carry. In theory, you could sort of do the modern thing and carry this with like a 3-shot bar in it and then carry a backup 10-shot bar. I'd love to have a chance to take one of these through something like a 2-gun match, because I think it'd be fun to do, but not with an original. At any rate, there are a couple different mechanisms for these, and Rock Island, this particular auction, has 2 that are good examples of some of the major differences. So these are lots 1318 and 1319, and you could become the new owner of either of these if you're interested. But I figured we can go ahead and take a closer look and show you some different styles of harmonica pistols. All right, so looking at these 2 guns, they're both double action. The first obvious difference we have is that this one has a fixed barrel, and the harmonica action is simply chambers, whereas this guy does not have a barrel. It's obviously shorter, and the harmonica action includes both chambers and barrels. So these are both 10-shot guns. Jarre was one of the predominant manufacturers of these. In theory, you could have as many rounds as you wanted in this. He tended to believe that 10 was about the appropriate maximum. There were some smaller ones devised as well. Now let's start with this guy. So to take a look at the action, the harmonica bar comes completely out of the gun. You can see we've got chambers there, and then these holes are where the pins from the cartridges would come up. And what we can do is there's a release lever right here. We push to the side. That allows this plate to come up. That allows you to load each of the cartridges. Then you have the pins exposed up. You can drop this back down. That's going to lock the cartridges in place back here. It's going to protect the pins and you have this circular hole that the hammer can drop into to fire each one in sequence. There is, in addition, a hole right here. This is where the hammer can rest before you start firing. On the bottom, you can see we have this series of camming blocks. So the camming blocks on the harmonica bar work in conjunction with this mechanism. You can see each time the gun is fired, this pin indexes the bar over one position in addition to dropping the hammer. So let's say I have this loaded. I'm going to insert it from this side, and I can snap it into position. That's how the gun is at rest. The first time I fire it, it's going to index I'm being careful here not to drop the hammer dry. Obviously, when you're using this for real, you would let it snap and fire the cartridges. But, you know, this is an original, and I don't want to break it before the auction, so we're being a little careful here. All right, so the smaller second pistol we have here uses the same basic mechanism, but it's a little more sophisticated in some ways and works a little differently. Obviously, it has 10 full barrels, much shorter, instead of having a fixed barrel. And same basic action. When I pull the trigger, it is going to index the harmonica slide forward once for each shot. Again, I'm just holding the hammer so I don't drop it dry firing. What makes this one a little bit more interesting, this does remove entirely, but you don't have to remove it. I can slot this, so I can hang the block right there loose, and then I can actually pivot the chambers open like this to reload without the harmonica block actually coming loose from the gun. So I can load all 10 of my cartridges. I flip it up like that. We have, again, a block here that locks the cartridges in place, and then we have protective gaps for each of the pins. I can then rotate this back into line, and you'll see there is a hammer notch right here, and it has an angled slant, or an angled wedge going up to it. That allows me to snap it into position and have the hammer locked in that position. Just like that. That locks the harmonica in place, but it's safe. The hammer is not resting on one of the pins. And in theory, if you had some convenient way to do it, you could carry the gun like this in a relatively safe manner. Then, when you go to fire the first time, it moves the block just onto the very first barrel. So the indexing mechanism for this particular harmonica is a little bit simpler, but works the same way. When I pull the trigger, we have a little moving wedge down there. It simply grabs the protrusion on the bottom of the harmonica bar and pulls it over a notch. So here you can clearly see the locking lugs, or the movement lugs on the bottom of this pistol. So interesting note of trivia. John Moses Browning's father, Jonathan Browning, was a professional gunsmith, and one of the things he was actually relatively well known for was the quality of his harmonica guns. I did find it a little bit interesting that we have the front sight here, and then the rear sight is a notch engraved in the hammer there, but this is not a single action gun, so the hammer doesn't lock back. So the sight, if you want to use it, you have to hold tension on the trigger like there to get the hammer all the way back, then use the sight. Not a very practical system. But then again, you don't really need the sights on something this tiny anyway. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Got to take a look at a couple examples of a neat, old, obsolete type of firearm that you don't see very much. If you're interested in becoming the new owner of either of these pistols, they are available in the Rock Island auction, September 2014. The link is in the description below, so go ahead and check it out. Throw in a bid if you're interested, and good luck. Thanks for watching.